Okay, let's see. That, and that. Good to see everybody. And now you see me. Okay. I am here in my new studio. Though we get into professional video production, so we're in a new studio now. Just getting set up. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's chant Jai Radha Madhava. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janak Balaba Giribharadhati Gopi Janak Balaba Giribharadhati Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Giribharadhati Gopi Jana Balaba Giribharadhati Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhidakacharya also Teta Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Savaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Param Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Parabo Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasiti Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapanath Shyam Kund Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuradam Ki Jai Jagannathaswami Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda, Hari 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 Bol. So, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravadi Pajani Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Dejatarni. So, Ganatimadandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Jakshuram Nidhitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So now we are reading from the Chaitanya Caritamrta, the Adi Leela. This is a very philosophical part of the Chaitanya Caritamrta, and the philosophy gets deep. It's not so many stories now, which most of you actually enjoy stories, but the Chaitanya Caritamrta contains the most elaborate, definitive philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and of course that's of ourselves, our whole disciplic succession. So it's very important to understand these basic points of philosophy before we go further in the Chaitanya Caritamrita. And yesterday and today we're going to be dealing, well, yesterday we were dealing, today we're going to be dealing, continuing to deal, with the Chatu Shloki verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 4 verses of the Bhagavatam, that contain the very essence of the Bhagavatam that are being repeated in the Chaitanya Caritamrita. So let's continue. Share our screen. Let's see. Where's the screen? Okay, there's the screen. Let me just see what new features. Huh. It's interesting. Okay, just looking at Zoom, because Zoom is adding new features all the time. Okay, so text 54 of the Adi Leela, chapter 1. Let's just move this out of the way so I can see. Arite ritam napatiyeta chat napatiyeta chatmani tadvidyadadmano mayam yatavasho yatatamaha. And we began to explain this verse yesterday, but I'll explain it again. This is what Maya is. If you see something and you don't see its connection with Krishna, that is Maya. Even though that thing exists, Krishna's illusory energy exists, the material energy exists, but we are perceiving it in the wrong way. We are seeing it as the ultimate reality, whereas it's a reflection of the ultimate reality. So, actually, I have to read the verse. Whatever appears to be truth without me, that's Krishna, is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows. For in the light, there are neither shadows nor reflections. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the previous verse, the absolute truth and its nature have been explained. One must also understand the relative truth to actually know the absolute truth. The relative truth, which is called Maya, or material nature, is explained here. Maya has no independent existence. One who is less intelligent is captivated by the wonderful activities of Maya, but he does not understand that behind these activities is the direction of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 9th chapter, text 10, it is said, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sachat Chadacharam, which basically means all, well, actually, probably translates it here. The material nature is working and producing moving and non-moving beings only by the supervision of Krishna. So, in other words, material energy is real, but if we see it as eternal, that's illusion. If we see it disconnected from Krishna, just independent from Krishna, that is illusion. But it is real, but it is temporary. And also we have this verse in the Bhagavad Gita. What is that verse? Nasato vijite bhavo na bhavo vijite sataha. Ubiyorapi drishta antas tvanios tatvidarshabihi. That sages consider those things which have a temporary existence to be unreal. Not unreal in the sense that they never existed, but unreal in the sense of considering them to be a tattva, substantial. I'll give you the example of a soap bubble. A soap bubble is definitely real in one sense, but if you think it has any substantial identity, eternal identity, it certainly is not real in that sense. Someone sent me a message. Oh, the better to see you. Yeah, okay. So it's certainly not real in that sense. You understand? Because it's temporary. So we don't take it so seriously like happiness, distress comes and goes. You see like emotions, they come and they go like waves in the ocean. I know that rhymes. Emotions come and go like waves in the ocean. The real nature of Maya, the illusory existence of the material manifestation, is clearly explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The absolute truth is substance. In other words, it continues to exist. It's real. It's not like a soap bubble. This life is like a soap bubble. The soap bubble grows. When a little kid blows it with one of those little soap bubble things, it grows and grows. It floats in the air and then ultimately dissipates or explodes or something. And the relative truth depends upon its relationship with the absolute for its existence. So, in other words, this material energy, which is the relative truth, depends upon the existence of Krishna for its existence. Maya means energy. Therefore, the relative truth is explained to be the energy of the absolute truth. Very easy to understand. Absolute truth is Krishna. Since it is difficult to understand the distinction between the absolute and relative truths, an analogy may be given for clarification. The absolute truth can be compared to the sun, which is appreciated in terms of two relative truths, reflection and darkness. That's really interesting, this analogy. Two relative truths, reflections and darkness. Darkness is the absence of sunshine, and a reflection is a projection of sunlight into darkness. Neither darkness nor reflection has an independent existence. So the material world is a reflection and is also in darkness. Darkness comes when the sunshine is blocked. For example, if one stands facing the sun, his back will be in darkness. Pretty good. Since darkness stands in the absence of the sun, it is therefore relative to the sun. The spiritual world is compared to the real sunshine, and the material world is compared to the dark regions where the sun is not visible. Interesting analogy. When the material manifestation appears very wonderful, this is due to a perverted reflection of the supreme sunshine, the absolute truth, as confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. So in other words, we have modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Whatever one can see here has its substance in the absolute. As darkness is situated far away from the sun, so the material world is also far away from the spiritual world. The Vedic literature directs us not to be captivated by the dark regions, tamaha, but try to reach the shiny regions of the absolute, yogi dham. That's interesting. Param Dhama is here referred to as yogi dham. It means when you connect with Krishna, that's where you go. The word yogi means someone who connects with Krishna. So yogi dham means a place for those who connect with Krishna. So yoga is the process, yogi is the person. Yogeshvara is the controller of yoga, and that's Krishna. The supreme world is, the spiritual world, is brightly illuminated, but the material world is wrapped in darkness. In the material world, sunshine, moonshine, or different kinds of artificial light are required to dispel darkness, especially at night. For by nature, the material world is dark. Therefore, the Supreme Lord has arranged for sunshine and moonshine. But in his abode, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, text 6, there is no necessity for lighting by sunshine, moonshine, or electricity, because everything is self-effulgent. In verses, Tad Bhasyate Suryo, Nachashanko Napavakaha, Yadgatva Nanivartante Tad Dhamma Parama Mama. And verse states that in the spiritual world there's no need of sunlight, moonlight, or electricity. And one who goes there doesn't come back. That which is relative, temporary, and far away from the absolute truth is called Maya, or ignorance. This illusion is exhibited in two ways, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The inferior illusion is inert matter, and the superior illusion is the living entity. Okay? So this matter is an illusion, and the entity that's experiencing that illusion is the living entity, so it's called the superior illusion. The living entities are called illusory in this context only because they're implicated in the illusory structures and activities of the material world. Actually, the living entities are not illusory, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya if they do not want to be so. So in other words, indirectly we can understand we wanted to be so. We wanted to be covered. Why? Because we wanted to imitate Krishna. And that's why we're here. The actions of the living entities in the spiritual kingdom are not illusory. They are actually eternal activities of liberated souls. Next of the Chatu Shlokis. Yatamahanti bhutani bhuteshu cha vacheshvanu pravashtani apravashtani tathateshu nateshvaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside of them, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. So this is a little bit like Achincha Veda Veda Tattva. So, okay, let's read the purport. The gross material elements is called Panchamahabhuta, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combined with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world, and yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world as well as beyond it. This is a great mystery, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop, just as without the presence of the spirit within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of God enters it as Paramatma, or the Supersoul. The personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma, enters every entity from the biggest to the most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has the single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person as a man meets another man, face to face. So here it talks about how the Lord is within the material energy and not within the material energy. We as souls are within the material energy and not within the material energy. So what does that mean? That means, all right, let's give the example of the Lord first, that the Lord never touches the material energy. He's completely transcendental. And the example Prabhupada gives is just like the reflection of the moon in different bodies or on different bodies of water gets us to say the moon is on the lake or the moon is on the river, whereas the moon is not. Or just like when we open our curtains and the sunlight is there, we say, let the sun in. We're not actually letting the sun in, but we're letting the sun shine in. So the presence of the Supersoul is manifest in the heart, but we can't really say that the Supersoul is in matter. When you do a heart operation, you certainly don't see the Supersoul, and you certainly don't see the soul. The soul is transcendental. It can never touch matter. So in one sense, you could say it's in matter, and in another sense, you could say it's not in matter because it's not touching matter. It doesn't touch this material energy. It can't. It's of a different nature. For example, I, with my finger, cannot touch a radio wave. I can't touch it. I know it's there because I turn my radio because I don't listen to radio. But anyway, I know that, let's say a mobile phone, here's radio wave, picks up radio waves, mobile phone. So I know it's there, but I can't touch it because I'm of a different nature than this type of electromagnetic energy that's in the air. And of course, I mean, the electromagnetic energy is part of the material elements of the Lord, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. However, just giving an analogy to help us understand it, I'm of a different nature than that, so I can't touch it. I know it exists, but I can't touch it. So in the same way, the soul is of a different nature. The super soul, the paramount, is of a different nature of the material energy, and that can't touch it. It doesn't touch it. It doesn't come in contact. And the example I've given oftentimes is of someone playing a video game. Someone is playing a video game and shooting and going through all sorts of tests or whatever they go through with video games, because I haven't played one since they stopped making Pac-Man. He's going through all different tests and adventures and everything like that. But you can say, well, I'm in the video game right now. That's my character. That's my avatar. But you're not really there. You're there and not there simultaneously. I mean, your consciousness is there, projected onto that character in the video game, but that character is just an illusion. The character exists as some electronics, let's say electrons, whatever, going on within the computer. Actually, as some digital information. So, because we're not actually seeing the character as he is, all he is some digital information, zeros and ones, zeros and ones, ones and zeros, zeros and ones. I mean, billions of them. But that's what the character is. In the same way, in the material world, we see this body, but all the body is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. That's all. I mean, it's not zeros and ones, but it's either, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, or different combinations of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 material elements. But we're seeing it as something substantial, real. That's me. We look in the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall. Who is the best sannyasi of them all? Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple, Shri Radhikalokananda, sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavan. Wow. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing the messages from Vaikuntha, and his hands embrace the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by the tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. And the final, the Chatu Shloki verses. And this verse is actually very important, as are all of them. Etavadeva gigyasyam tattva gigyasanatmanaha anvaya vyaktirekavyam yatsarvatra sarvada. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. In other words, one who is a human being should be trying to find out who they are, where they come from, what's happening at the time of death, and what is the purpose of everything. It's called teleology. Teleology means the purpose of everything, or the study of the purposes. So that's what differentiates a human being from just an animal. Animals just engage in what? Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So a human being asks the questions. And a real intelligent human being is always looking for the answers to these questions. And even if he finds out the answers theoretically, He's always looking to connect to the absolute truth. And Prabhupada explains this in the purport. Those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress, like the offenses on chanting, offenses against deity worship, etc. And the means, that's the sadhana, bhakti process, and ultimately the Raganuga bhakti process, the Bhava bhakti process, and ultimately the Prema bhakti process. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple, and therefore a serious student must learn the science of all in all its aspects from him. So that's regulation is the word. It's described about the 6 Goswamis in Vrindavan. Their regulation was so, let's say, strict, it could be compared to lions on a stone. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness as conceived by a common man engaged in material labor is the lowest grade of happiness. That's eat, drink, and be merry. For it is in relationship with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by a fruitive worker who by pious activities reaches the plane of heaven of the kingdom of the creative gods with their delegated powers. Those are the demigods, of course. But the conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant in comparison to the happiness enjoyed in the impersonal Brahman, which is insignificant. And this Brahmananda, the spiritual bliss derived from impersonal Brahman, is like the water in the hoofprint of a calf compared to the ocean of love of Godhead. When one develops pure love for the Lord, he derives an ocean of transcendental happiness from the association of the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself to reach this stage of life is the highest perfection. One should try to purchase a ticket to go back home, back to Godhead. The price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is called lolium, intense desire, which is not easily awakened, even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of lives. All mundane relationships are sure to be broken in the course of time, but once one establishes a relationship with the personality of God in a particular ras, that means either, ras means a taste of a relationship. Now relationship means a taste of a relationship. Either the servitorship ras, the friendship ras, the parental ras, or the conjugal ras. It is never broken even after the annihilation of the material world. One should understand through the transparent medium of the spiritual master that the Supreme Lord exists everywhere in his transcendental spiritual nature, and that the living entity's relationships with the Lord are directly and indirectly existing everywhere, even in this material world. In the spiritual world, there are 5 kinds of relationships with the Supreme Lord: Shanta, Dasha, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. That means peaceful, servitude, friendship, parental, and conjugal. The perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world. Land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects are related in Shanta, or the neutral and silent sense, and also computers are in Shanta too. Whereas servants work in the Dasha relationship, the reciprocation between friends is called Sakya, the affection of a parent for a child is known as Vatsalya, and the affairs of conjugal love constitute Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. Tell me that again. If these rasas are reestablished with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal blissful life. From this and the preceding 3 verses of the Chaitanya Caritamrta, which have been selected from Srimad Bhagavatam, the missionary activities of Lord Chaitanya can be understood. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, which are summarized in the 4 verses. These are the 4 verses we just read. Beginning with the Hame Vasame Vagre, 53, and concluding with Yat Syat Sarvacha Sarvata, 56. In the first of these verses, 53, the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is explained. In other words, just to reiterate, it says, before the creation there was Krishna, after the creation there was Krishna, and during the creation there was Krishna. So Krishna is beyond time. The second verse, 54, further explains that the Lord is detached from the workings of material energy. In other words, defines Maya as seeing something separate from Krishna. The living entities, although parts and parcels of Lord Krishna, are prone to be controlled by the external energy. Therefore, although they are spiritual in the material world, they are encased in bodies of material energy. The eternal relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord is explained in that verse. The next verse, 55, instructs the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his inconceivable energies is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities in the material energy. In other words, the sun or the sunshine. This knowledge is called the Chincha Veda, all Veda, Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural transcendental love for him. This surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. In the next verse, 56, it is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master and try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds and his own existential position. In other words, who he is and why he's here. Here the words anvaya vyatirekabhyam, directly and indirectly, suggest that one must learn the process of devotional service in two aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to progress. There's another way of understanding that. Is one must understand the process of devotional service and also understand how to engage in this material world serving Krishna according to one's psychophysical nature. And beautiful verse. Oh, internet connection went unstable for a second. Hold on a second. Lila swayamvara rasam labate jaya shrihi. All glory is to Chintamani and my initiating spiritual master Somagiri. All glory is to my instructing spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who wears peacock feathers in his crown, under the shade of his lotus feet, which are like desire trees. Jaya Shri Radha is the transcendental mellow eternal concert. This verse is from the Krishna Caritamrta, which was written by a great Vaishnava sannyasi named Bhagavangal, who was also known as Lila Shuka. He intensely desired to enter into the eternal pastimes of the Lord, and he lived at Vrindavan for 700 years in the vicinity of Brahmakund, a still existing bathing tank. Vrindavan. And I've been there, Brahmakund. The history of Bilvamangal Thakur is given in a book called the Sri Ballabha Digvijaya. He appeared in the 8th century of the Shaka era in the province of Dravida and was the chief disciple of Vishnu Swami in a list of temples and monasteries kept in Shankaracharya's monastery in Dwarka. Bilvamangal is mentioned as the founder of the Dwarkadisha temple there. He instructed the service of his deity to Hari Brahmachari, a disciple of Vallabha Vata. Wow. Bilvamangal Thakur actually entered into the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna. He has recorded his transcendental experiences and appreciation in the book known as the Krishna Caritamrta. This is one of the books that Lord Chaitanya would read continually. In the beginning of that book, he has offered his obeisances to his different gurus, and it is to be noted that he has adored them all equally. The first spiritual master mentioned is Chintamani, who was one of his instructing spiritual masters because she first showed him the spiritual path. This is a wonderful story. Chintamani was a prostitute with whom Bilvamangal was intimate earlier in his life. She gave him the inspiration to begin on the path of devotional service, and because she convinced him to give up material existence to try for perfection by loving Krishna, and I'll tell the story about her in a second, he has first offered his respects to her. Next, he offers his respects to his initiating spiritual master, Somagiri, and then to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is also his instructing spiritual master. And I'll tell about that. He explicitly mentions Bhagavan, who has peacock feathers on his crown. Because the Lord of Vrindavan, Krishna the coward boy, used to come to Bilvamangal to talk with him and supply him with milk. In his adoration of Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, he states that Jaya Shri, the goddess of fortune, Srimati Radharani, takes shelter in the shade of his lotus feet to enjoy the transcendental rasa of nuptial love. The complete treatise, Krishna Karnamrita, is dedicated to the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani. It is a book to be read and understood by the most elevated devotees of Sri Krishna. So here's the story of Bilvamangal Thakur. As mentioned, Bilvamangal Thakur was very, very attached to this prostitute, Chintamani. So what happened is, once upon a time, there was a big storm and lightning and hail, and the river was flooded. And Chintamani happened to be at the opposite side of the river in her house. And she was taking shelter. The doors were locked in her house. And Bilvamangal Thakur was wondering, how and can I see my beloved Chintamani? Actually, it mentioned she was a prostitute, but most likely she was a girlfriend. Sorry about that. Which, anyway, she wasn't a professional prostitute. She was a girlfriend and not married. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to go further on that one. So anyway, so he was thinking, how can I go to see her? I cannot live without her. Oh, Chintamani. Not Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Vriksha Lakshapateshu, but Chintamani, wherefore art thou, Chintamani? It's like something like Romeo and Juliet. And he decided, I'm going to go see her. I'm going to cross the river. So what he did is he jumped in the river because he couldn't find a boat. Nobody's going to be stupid enough to have a boat in the river during a storm like that. And he swam across the river. He grabbed hold of a log. And he thought, wow, thank God I found this log. But the log happened to be a dead body. Yuck. Then he reached the outskirts of her house. And her house was surrounded by this really high fence with thorns on it and everything. And the door was locked. And he was thinking, how am I going to get over? You know, obviously, there's no doorbell. He couldn't call her on the mobile phone because the internet was out. Oh, sorry, there was no internet. So he couldn't call her. Anyway, she didn't know he was there, and the door was locked from the inside. So he decided, I'm going to climb over the wall. So he climbed. He found what he thought was a rope. And later on, he discovered it was a snake. Fortunately, he didn't get bit. But he got scratched up all over by these thorns. You know, in India, they have these really heavy thorns. Some of them are like 2 inches long. Have you ever been to Vrindavan and you step on some thorn, even though you're wearing shoes or whatever you're wearing on your feet, it goes right through. It is so painful. So anyway, so he scratched up, bleeding. He arrives at her door, knocks on her door. Knock, knock, knock. She opens. She's thinking, what? Who's there? Who would be so stupid to come? And she sees Bilvamangal, her boyfriend. He says, Bilvamangal, is that you? How did you get here? He describes the whole endeavor, you know, the snake, the body, and everything like that. And she says, wow, if you had as much determination to see me or to see Krishna as you have to see me, you'd be in the spiritual world by now. You'd be a pure devotee. You'd be a great saint. And he said, thank you. And he closed the door, took sannyas, headed for Vrindavan. But that's not all that happened on the way to Vrindavan, because he was prone to lusty desires at that time. So on the way to Vrindavan, he sees a beautiful girl. It was really guerrilla business. Like I said, anyway, men have that tendency to be guerrillas. But of course, he's a great devotee, but at this time he had that anartha. So he saw this woman and he followed her to her home. And she was married to a nice Brahmin man. And Bilvamangal was a Brahmin too. So he went to her husband. He said, I have something to ask of you, sir. I would like to be alone with your wife. And the Brahmin thinking, well, I have to do what another Brahmin asks. You know, this is a religious principle. So he said, okay. You can be alone with my wife. So he goes into the room to be alone with this Brahmin's wife. And he says, Mataji, because that's the way you actually get rid of any improper relationship. You call a lady Mataji, either she gets angry or, like Arjuna did to Urvasi, either she gets angry or just like diffuses any sort of lusty relationship. He said, Mataji, give me your hairpin. So she was thinking, what does he want my hairpin for? So she pulls out the hairpin, gives it to him, and he plucks his eyes out, and he becomes blind. Somehow or other, he makes it to Vrindavan. Okay, so he goes to Vrindavan, and every day there's a little boy who's bringing him something to eat. He realizes it, that it's Krishna. And one day he tries to grab the boy's hand just to hold him so the boy can't get away. And the boy is able to wrest himself from Bilvamangal Thakur's grasp. And Bilvamangal Thakur says to him, you can pull yourself away from my grasp, but you can't pull yourself out of my heart. Very romantic statement there. And so every day Bilvamangal Thakur would speak to this boy, and that's how he got his realization from, first of all, Chintamani, who just gave me impetus to take up devotional service fully and wholly, Samagiri, his initiating spiritual master, and ultimately Krishna, his instructing spiritual master. Such a wonderful story. So he lived for hundreds of years in Vrindavan, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu loved to read from Bilvamangal Thakur's Krishna Caritamrta. And that verse was written by him. Okay? Beautiful, beautiful verse. Next text. Jive sakshat nahi tate guru chaityarupe. This is Bengali again. Shiksha guru haya Krishna mahanta sarupe. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the Super Soul, he appears before us as the liberated such a spiritual master, none other than Krishna himself. In other words, he's representing Krishna. It's not that in all ways he's Krishna. Purport, it's not possible for a conditioned soul to directly meet Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but if one becomes a sincere devotee and seriously engages in devotional service, Lord Krishna sends an instructing spiritual master to show him favor and invoke his dormant propensity for serving the Supreme. The preceptor appears before the external senses of the fortunate conditioned soul, and at the same time guided from within by the Guru, that's Super Soul. Krishna was seated as a spiritual master within the heart of the living entity. And that's very similar to another verse of the Chaitanya Caritamrta Adi. Kondaval Krishna Prasad. The is wandering all over the different universes, and by the mercy of Krishna, he gets Guru, and the Guru, the internet connection is unstable again. Unfortunate. And then the Guru gives him this Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of the creeper of devotion. So by the mercy of Krishna, one gets Guru, and by the mercy of Guru, one gets Krishna. How about that? So text 59. Tato duk sangam utsrija satsu sajeta buddhiman sante vasya chindanti manovya sangamukbihi. One should therefore avoid bad company, associate only with devotees. With their realized instructions, such saints can cut the knot connecting one with activities unfavorable to devotional service. Very important. And of course, in the Upadeshamrita, it lists bad association as one of the causes of fall down. Achahara prayasascha pajalpa nimanraha. Jana sangas. Jana sangas means bad association, or with ordinary people. One should avoid, one has to be very careful of bad association. I just got a message from one of my disciples in a different country, and he was telling me he's so worried about his sister who's going to the high school there, and there's so much bad association, and he sees his sister gradually slipping from Krishna's grasp, gradually slipping away, just trying to conform with her friends, and he's just so sad. He's asking for my prayers, asking me, what can I do? It's just so painful to see people taking bad association, just slipping away gradually into the whirlpool of material existence. So, with their realized instruction, such saints can cut the knot connecting one with activities unfavorable to devotional service. That's why sadhu is heavy, cuts. This verse, which appears in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 11th canto, 26th chapter, text 26, was spoken by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the text known as the Uddhava Gita. The discussion relates to the story of Pururava and the heavenly courtesan, Urvashi. When Urvashi left Pururava, he was deeply affected by the separation and had to learn to overcome his grief. Of course, according to the Bhagavatam, he went through a lot of austerities, and ultimately had to perform a sacrifice to get back together with her. After years and years and years. It is indicated that to learn the transcendental science, it is imperative that one avoid the company of undesirable persons and always seek the company of saints and sages who are able to impart lessons of transcendental knowledge. The potent words of such realized souls penetrate the heart, thereby eradicating all misgivings accumulated through years of undesirable association. For a neophyte devotee, there are two kinds of persons whose association is undesirable. One, gross materialists who constantly engage in sense gratification, and two, unbelievers who do not serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but serve their senses and their mental whims in terms of their speculative habits. Intelligent persons seeking the transcendental realization should very scrupulously avoid their company. So, in other words, you can be a gross materialist, simply interested in the gratification of your senses, but still go to the temple, go to the church, worship God, with the intention of being facilitated in your gross material sense gratification. And that type of person needs to be avoided. Even though they're at the temple, they may be saying, Haribol, Haribol, Gorunga. You have to be very, very careful. We have to see or be interested in dealing with people who are trying to revive their eternal relationship with Krishna. And the second type of materialist or undesirable persons who do not even believe in God, they're atheists or have some other philosophy. Materialists, atheists. Let's see. And actually, I think we should end here because this next verse is an extremely important verse. It's Lord Kapiladev's instructions from the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sanskrit verse. And I think it'll take some time to go over it tomorrow. But it's a verse that Prabhupada would recite often, and it bears memorizing. Okay, so at this particular point, we're going to end tonight's reading. We're up to, let me just mark this down, up to 59. Up to 59. And we're going to take some questions. Stop sharing. And give me 1 second. Unmute you. Okay. Okay, so who has some questions? Does anybody? Is that Charna? You have a question? Oh, no, it's not Charna. Who else? Who's raising their hand? Charna, okay. Yeah, why don't you ask a question?
Hare
That was
Krishna. Wait a
yeah.
second, I have double sound. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranama, glories to Srila Prabhupada. I want to
All good.
ask this Lauliam. So, in one way, we are encouraged to have this Lauliam wish to come home back to Godhead. On the other hand, we have this, we have to cultivate this state of mind, whatever, wherever we go after that, just to serve Krishna. So, how to how to manage with these two. In one way, to have this laulium, and the other to come back home to Godhead, and on the other way, just to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's mission wherever we are.
It depends on what stage one is at. In the beginning, one is encouraged to desire to go back to Godhead. So unless one becomes very advanced and simply wants to please Prabhupada, don't artificially imitate someone at a higher stage. So Prabhupada did encourage us to want to go back to Godhead. At one point, one devotee said something like, uh, Prabhupada, I just want to serve Krishna life after life. And Prabhupada said, no, you should want to go back to Godhead. So until we are naturally at the stage of simply wanting to please Prabhupada and please the pure devotees and please Krishna and please Radharani, we should desire to go back to Godhead. Because it's actually quite artificial, as long as we have material desires, for us to say, I only desire to please Radha and Krishna, I only desire to please Prabhupada. That's a very artificial statement unless one is actually on that platform. So one should really be introspective enough to understand what platform one is at. Okay? That's good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for distributing books, too. She's doing well in the book distribution.
It's just a pleasure for you and for Srila Prabhupada. That was my intention. Yes, I was thinking about you very, very intensely when I approached the president of my country. So
Yeah,
I said,
amazing.
I would like to you to be smiled after that, something like that, to be satisfied. That
Yeah,
that was
I'm
my
very
prime
happy
goal.
to hear that. I'm very happy.
Yeah, thank you.
You please, Lord Chaitanya. So, all right, so Pranesha has his usual question.
Yeah, like really, I have two questions.
Yeah.
Number one is how to avoid bad association in the work and in the in the company.
I think you've asked that
Mm.
before. Just have your wife protect you all the time, and then you'll be safe from bad association. You have a nice devotee wife, so just like take shelter at her lotus feet. And that's the solution. I'm sure she'll like that one. Anyway, so
Okay, how to
how to avoid, you always remember why you're doing what you're doing when you're doing it, and see everybody who you're working with as a spirit soul who's under the influence of material nature, and feel compassionate and pray for them. Always maintain a mood of compassion towards everyone you come in contact with, and see everyone in relationship with Krishna. Okay, that's it. That's a good question.
yes.
Okay,
And
that's your
second,
question. That's your
as
question.
Prabhupada
Question.
said about the
Uh-oh. What? What's the next question? Well, his internet went out.
wife is a maid servant. Is it true statement?
Wife is
Prabhupada
a
said,
maidservant. No, you're the manservant.
yes, Gurudev, yes.
No, you got it all wrong, buddy. You're the manservant. You're not the. You think you got a maidservant?
And
That is illusion. Oh my God.
no, that no. Actually, she said about to me. The Prabhupada has said about the wife is a maid servant. You said.
But in reality, probably was just saying that to encourage you. But you're the servant. Actually, there's a story with Bhakti with Gorkashordas Babaji Maharaj. One couple approached right after getting married. They approached Gorkashordas Babaji Maharaj, and they asked Gorkashordas Babaji Maharaj, please give us some instructions. And he said to the man, you should always cook for your wife, clean for your wife, and serve your wife. So the right relationship between husband and wife is that each one should be thinking that they're serving the other. You should not think that, oh my goodness, now I got a free servant. This is illusion.
Yes, Gurudev.
The
I
men
said the
think,
same.
the men think like that, oh, now I have a maidservant, I don't have to pay her a salary. Well, I got news. You're going to have to pay her more of a salary anyway. And you're just think that you're a servant and you're serving her and she's serving you. That's the right attitude. Seriously.
Yes.
If you think you have a maidservant, you're in big trouble.
Yes. Actually, Gurudev, she said yesterday.
You think you're Krishna and you have your gopis now.
No, Gurudev. This is not my statement. This is her statement.
No, and I'm making the
This is not
statement. Yes,
not my. I'm not.
she may think
Actually,
that she's your maidservant, and you should think that you're her manservant, that you serve everybody. But if you're of the conception that she's my maidservant, oh my
no.
God!
I never think like this. And I said this
So
is not
don't.
the true. Then we need to ask from Gurudev. So I asked this question.
Your business is to serve her, and she serves you in Krishna consciousness. You're both serving Lord Chaitanya
Yes,
and Srila
Gurudev.
Prabhupada.
Yes.
But I mean, to think, I mean, like even it's like the spiritual master. The spiritual master thinks that the disciple is his servant. Then he's taking advantage. The disciple could think, yes, I'm a servant of my spiritual master. But the spiritual master internally shouldn't think, oh, I have so many servants. Externally he may say this or that. But if he's thinking, oh, so many servants, it's just like some Bollywood movie, like Ravana is sitting on his throne and being fanned by all the ladies, and like some Roman emperor being fed with grapes. You should learn how to cook for your wife.
Yes, Gurudev. I must learn, and I will cook every day.
Yeah, cook for your wife. You should switch up. One day she can cook for you, another day you can cook for your wife.
Yes, Gurudev.
That way we'll have a nice relationship.
Yes,
It's a
yes, Gurudev.
mutual service. Dadati pratigrunati guyamakyati prichati bhumte bhujate. She's a devotee. She's a devotee. She's just as much a devotee as you are.
Yes, Gurudev.
So, phew. Maidservant. Oh my
No,
God.
actually, she said about this disturbance.
I would like to be a maidservant of Krishna.
Yes, Gurudev.
That's how you should pray. Please make. That's what we're praying when we're actually worshiping Tulsi Devi, right?
Yes, Gurudev.
Please make me a maidservant. And every day we're praying, that
Yes.
Sakyara Gatakara. Make me your servant. This lowly servant of Krishna prays, may always swim in the love of Sri Sri Radha Govinda. Maidservant. Oh my God. You think it's just another employee? Just getting married, like another a good-looking employee who lives with you.
No, Gurudev, I said her, this is not correct a statement, so I should talk to Gurudev in the class and I should get the clarification. And then she
Yes.
agreed because she said that. So it is good. Thank you so much, Gurudev, for your answer. And it also, I cook for one day. And she cook for
All
one
right.
day.
All right. That's enough questions. That's enough questions for today. Hopefully, after a while, you won't ask me questions. But anyways, all right. So, on that happy note. All right. So, who else has a question?
Gurudev,
Yes, Mr. Cohen.
may I ask a follow-up question to Praneshwar's question?
Yes.
So, and you also mentioned the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master. So when one considers oneself the servant of the spouse or the spiritual master, there can be some kind of tendency of thinking, I've done so much service, when am I going to get my payment?
No, then you're considering yourself a business exchange. That's not a servant. That's actually you're doing business. That's baniya. Just like Prahlad Maharaj said to Nrsingadev, when Lord Nrsingadev said, whatever you want, I'll give you. Prahlad Maharaj said, I'm not a maid. I'm not maidservant. I'm not a businessman. Not a baniya. I'm not a businessman. So he said, I have no other relationship with you, Lord Nrsimhadev, other than master and servant relationship. But it's not like the servant who gets paid. There's a difference. It's an eternal servant. Just like we say, I'm your eternal servant. Janme Janme Prabhu say, what we're chanting every morning. So eternal servant means that there's no pay. Employee is something different.
But also there's that statement that if we consider ourselves to be servants of Krishna, we always depend on Krishna to maintain us.
Yes. And then also, Krishna, you can crush me by your embrace. Leave me brokenhearted by not being present before me. You're completely free to do anything and everything, and you always remain my worshipful Lord, unconditional. Yes, we depend on Krishna to maintain us in the way he wants to maintain us. If he wants to put us in a cow shed, that's his prerogative. Or as they say, the doghouse. It's an interesting expression because sometimes that's used in married life where the husband says, my wife has put me in the doghouse. So Krishna wants to put us in the doghouse or the cow shed. But look what he did to the Pandavas. So Krishna will maintain us, yes, and protect us according to what he feels is best for us. That's the love and the surrender that we have in relationship with Krishna. So anyway, so we don't demand a salary, we don't do anything in return. That's the gopis say that. You can do anything and everything. And you always remain my worshipful Lord unconditionally. That's the gopis, Narayana parak sarvena katastina bibhyati swarga pavarga narakeshu api tulyartha darshana. We go to heaven, we can go to hell, for as long as we're serving you. Mama janmani janmani shvare bhavatad bhakti ahai tuki twaye. Right? Okay, who else has a question? Who else is bold enough to ask a question? Jai Radhika. Okay, unmute yourself.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances to you. My question is, when we were reading through how the material world is temporary, so I was just thinking, the intricacies of it, because we get entangled so much in the society norms, and we forget this, and then also we read through how a person should be submissive and surrendered soul to understand, to realize the existence of the higher purpose and all that. So sometimes if a person they don't have devotional service, or they're not probably doing as much, even a devotee can go through get entangled into material society norms. The world is so short, our lives are so short, and we can easily get entangled into the material things. I was thinking,
that's called illusion.
Yeah.
But we have to work within the principles of this material world. I often compare it to using a computer. You have to work within the parameters of the computer when you're using a computer, but you also recognize that you have a separate identity outside of the computer world.
Yes.
So you have to keep both things in mind.
Yeah.
Or like a video game. Actually, I do not play video games, but I've seen plenty of people play video games.
Yeah.
And so in video games, you have certain rules and regulations. And you just stick to those. You have to stick to those rules and regulations because that's the way it functions in the video game.
Yeah.
But you remember that you're not part of the video game.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can just step out of it at any minute.
Yeah.
So in the same way, to function in this world, let's say if you're working a job, hopefully you are working. You still have your job?
No, just recently, 2 months ago, my job's gone because of the COVID.
Oh, got to get a new one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I was about to get actually yesterday, but then I got a bad news. They really liked me and all that, but however, someone internal got the job there because they were
All
laid
right,
off.
just
So
keep trying to get a job.
yeah, I have to.
So just like if you have a job,
Yeah.
if you have a job, then you function according to the rules of the job, but you understand that you have a separate identity too.
Yes.
Your life is not a job. You're working your job to support your activities in life,
That's right.
not that you have your life to support your job,
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. Yeah.
unless you happen to be Musk,
Yeah. Yeah.
Elon Musk. Anyway, that's a
Yeah.
different thing. His life is his job, and his job is his life.
Yeah.
But that's quite a bit of different scenario at that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like another example is being like a lotus leaf that is on the water, that has a waxy covering that doesn't get touched by the water, doesn't get waterlogged from the
Yeah.
water.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a trick to work in this world
Yeah.
and not be of this world
Yeah. Exactly.
simultaneously.
Yeah, you've nicely explained that, Guru Maharaj. It's like, I know we have the society norm. We can go through the all processes and do everything in the as per the society norm. But then again, we have to have our own identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have to have our own identity, but we have to follow the rules. It's like, just like driving a car.
Yeah.
You're driving a car to go somewhere, but you have to follow the rules of the road.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go too fast. You have to drive on, where you are, you have to drive on the left side of the road.
Yeah.
You can't just decide to drive on the right side like we do here.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think there's time for one more question. Sumuki has a question. I'm just joking. His name is Sumuk, not Sumuki. You have to unmute yourself. You're muted.
Yes, Gurudev. Please accept my humble obeisance to the organization Srila Prabhupada. Gurudev, I have one small question. Two questions really. One is when you hear somebody sick on bed and is suffering because of sickness, then they ask us to pray for them. So in
Yeah.
this case, how do we actually do the prayer? What do we say during those prayers?
Well, it depends on who it is.
Or anyone.
Well, devotee, non-devotee,
Devotee?
Donald Trump. I mean, who is it?
No, devotees. No, some devotees are sick, they're suffering
Then
from
we pray,
cancer.
my dear Lord, if you so desire, like Prabhupada instructed us in the case of himself when he was getting ready to leave this world, if you so desire, please cure so and so that he or she can render devotional service.
Second question, Gurudev, is yesterday you said in class that we can hear the super soul, or the super soul can we can hear the super soul. What was that really yesterday in the class? You said that.
We can hear the super soul through our intelligence. First of all, we have a desire, and super soul gives us the intelligence to do something according to that desire. And that form direction, the intelligence, Prabhupada said, is the form direction of the super soul. That's how you hear the super soul.
Thank
Not
you.
directly. I mean, obviously, you don't hear him like you're hearing me speaking, hopefully. Well, hopefully you do, but you don't. Okay, I think we have to end now. It is time. And all glories to, we'll see everybody tomorrow evening. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.